All right, so good morning, everyone. And we're going to make an official start. Welcome to today's first session. And today we'll be focusing on the lived experience and the role of the carers and survivors. And so today we have three persons on our panel who would have had the lived experience, and two persons who would have lived the experience and one carer. And so to give you a little bit about our persons who will share their experience, we have Mr. Nia Saban. He's a Guyanese media personnel with years of experience in local media and performing arts, notably in 2007 to 2015, Mr. Saban served as the director of the Government Information Network Agency, GINA, as it's locally known, and he has also served in several managerial positions at the National Communication Network. Mr. Saban has also written several poems, a short story, and most recently a book on his experience with depression. He has been involved in many Guyanese NGOs over the years, including the Indian Action Committee and the Ethnic Relations Commission. Mr. Saban is also a member of Parliament, and he was recently appointed the CEO acting of the National Communication Network. So that is about Mr. Saban. And we also have Mr. Brian Stadling, is the president of the One Mind organization with a mission to One Mind accelerate collaborative research and advocacy to enable an individual facing brain mental health challenges to build healthy, productive lives. Mr. Stadling channels his deep experience in communicating advocacies and personal schizophrenia recovery drive brain health research program to heal lives. Brandon also served as an advisory councils of the World Economic Forum, the National Institute of Mental Health, the California Mental Health Service Authority, Help at Hand Program, Mind Strong Health, and Stanford University Prodrome and Early Psychotic Program Network, and is a member of the Stability Network. Mr. Stadling has successfully advocated for the growth of the data-driven network, continually improving prevention, early intervention for youth facing serious psychiatric illness. And we also have Ms. Cilandell Glen, who is a carer for someone who, in her family, who would have been experiencing mental illness. Ms. Glen is a young woman who's passionate about adolescent and community mental health, youth development. She is the Adolescent Health Coordinator of the Ministry of Health, and in her capacity, she contributes to the development implementations of programs to address adolescent health countrywide. She believes in the mantra, service is the rent we paid for the privilege of living on this earth. To live our mantra and to contribute to the development of our community, our country, and the world, she volunteers with the Rotary Club of Georgetown as a member of that organization. She has served in many capacities as director, secretary, assistant district representative, and president. She is currently a Rotarian and of the Rotary Club of Georgetown. So I will now open the floor to our presenters, Dr. Helen and Dr. Christina Hoven, and we will tell you a bit about them a bit later in the program. But first, let us hear from our persons with the lived experience. So we'll ask Mr. Brandon Stadling to go first to share his experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this very important event. It's my honor to share it with you today about my lived experience with schizophrenia and suicidality, and how my family was instrumental in helping me live through that very dark time. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which is a very serious mental illness, which includes delusions, hallucinations, and other features of psychosis, when I was 18 years old. And it was the darkest and the scariest and nearly the last experience of my life. I was experiencing delusions that made me think that at any moment I might go to hell if I made the slightest moral mistake. And this was very disturbing to me to think this from moment to moment. And I was always on edge throughout those first 3 months while trying to find a medication that would help me reduce those symptoms of psychosis and help me get back to a life that I could feel good about again, that had any quality or joy in it. And the uncertainty of not knowing if any of those treatments would help me, because they weren't for quite a while, and the pain and anguish of the delusions I was experiencing drove me to deep exhaustion and despair. And at one very dark moment, I nearly ended my life. I'm very grateful to be with you today, be alive today to advocate for others facing these serious challenges. Instrumental in my recovery, as I was saying at the time a few minutes ago, was that my family was there to support me, and it was not easy for them either. They had to educate themselves about my condition, what it meant, about resources available, and ways to connect with them. And they were true champions for me throughout my early recovery process. When I was feeling so incredibly depressed that I felt that I couldn't go on, their unconditional love made it through to me. There was a moment when I was in the kitchen of my family's home, just staring at the floor, feeling completely dejected. And my father noticed how down I was feeling. And he said to me, "There's a lot of love coming from here, Brandon." And even though I was feeling so wrapped up in my illness that I couldn't feel that love back, I wanted to feel it back because I knew he meant what he said. And so that love demonstrated through what he said and through all the things he and my mom and my sister also did to protect me, to support me, to give me the services that I needed to recover, was so instrumental, so key in me wanting to recover and having the strength to do so. So that love of my family, coupled with staying involved in community activities and getting early science-based care, are the three things to which I attribute my recovery from my first episode of schizophrenia. And since then, my family's been a huge support all along. Today, I work as president of One Mind, the organization that my family and I founded in 1995, inspired by our shared experience with my schizophrenia. And I also advocate, as was mentioned in the introduction, for an emerging care model that incorporates the family as a foundational part of any young patient's recovery from the serious mental illness that they're experiencing. And I can talk more about that later. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go through the panel.
All right, so now we will hear from Miss Glen. She would like us to call her Cindy. So now we'll have her share her experience with caring. So Miss Glen, you can unmute your mic and go ahead.
Okay, good morning, Ms. Solomon. Thank you very much. And good morning to my fellow panelists and to all of the participants of this morning's conference. It's indeed a pleasure to be here to join Guyana in hosting our first mental health and well-being conference. I would like to commend the organizers firstly for having this conference in such a timely manner. And I'm also honored to be here to share with you. Now, I'm not the person who was directly mental illness, but I would have supported and cared for a very close family member of mine. Now, I will not disclose my family member's name on the conference, But what I would like to say is, as a result of his experience, I was driven towards completing my master's in child and adolescent mental health at the University of Northampton in the United Kingdom. And as a result of his experience also, and my family's experience during the time that he would have been suffering from anxiety, I started the organization, or rather I founded the organization Desert Flower Guyana, which seeks to improve the mental health and well-being of children and adolescents in Guyana. Now, as an individual who would have studied social work and would have been working in the field as a counselor and working towards providing support for children and adolescents, I was very much surprised that I wasn't able to recognize what my family member was going through at that time. It took a very tragic episode or experience for me to actually recognize that he was suffering from anxiety. During that time, I felt like I had no purpose. I felt that I would have wasted my time studying at the University of Guyana, completing my social work degree, because I'm always helping other persons, but I wasn't able to recognize what was happening within my own family. But I'm thankful that I was able to pull myself out of that zone, and I was able to provide the support that was needed for him. I was able to connect him with other counselors that was able to help him through his experience. I was able to discuss with my family members what are some of the things that we could do to support him during his time with anxiety. I was able to do activities with him that would have helped him to calm down during his episodes that he was experiencing. And I was able to just simply sit and have conversations with him that would have led him to the point where he was able to function normal again in society. One of the things that I would like to say to persons, and also echo to what Brandon would have said, is that it's important that as family members, we provide support to our loved ones who are experiencing a mental issue, whether it's depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia, because there's so many mental issues that our relatives and families can experience. It is important that we provide that support. I remember being up late at night with my relative, just talking with him. I remember being at points where I was scared that I would go home or I'll visit my family member and I will find him at a point where he's harming himself or hurting himself. I was at points where I was scared to receive a phone call to say, hey, Cindy, your relative is on the street walking because of his illness. So as a carer, or as somebody that is providing support to somebody living with a mental issue, we all need to take care of ourselves. We also need to understand that, yes, we are here to provide support, but we have to take care of ourselves. We also need to understand or know that we will be placed in a position where we are scared, where we are fearful for the outcomes of our relatives. But just know that once you're there, once you're showing that love and support, that person will genuinely be better. That person will accept your support. There was times when I felt that my family would be judged if persons know that we have somebody in my family that is suffering from a mental issue. And at times I felt that I would be judged, knowing that I would have studied social work, knowing that I'm working within the health field. I felt that I did not want to disclose these experiences that my family member was experiencing. But in talking with other persons, other support persons that I would have had, they would have helped me to recognize that, hey, Cindy, as much as mental health is something that is taboo in our country that is not talked about, you can create that change. And I would have spoke with my relative, and we decided, you know what, if this is your passion, you could actually start your organization to contribute to to let other family know that they don't have to experience what you would have experienced, and to let other families know that it's okay to have somebody that is living with a mental issue within your family, and to let other family know that there is support and help out there. So in closing, what I would like to say, as much as the experience is at sometimes devastating, is sometimes hurting for a carer that is providing that support, that you need to stay strong. You need to provide that support for your loved ones so that they can live that long and healthy life. Because mental health, living with a mental health issue is not a death sentence. Once the support is there, that person can recover. That person can live to share, like Brandon would have shared, about all of the good work that he is doing, even though he would have lived through a mental health experience. So as carers, just ensure that you provide that support that is needed. Does ensure that you also provide care for yourself, and let us make a difference towards removing the stigma and the barriers that is attached to persons accessing mental health services. Thank you.
All right, so we've heard quite a mouthful from Ms. Glen and Mr. Brandon Stadling. I don't see our other presenter or other person with the lived experience, and so we will now introduce two other panelists who will now share on their experiences and what we can do to support and help persons who are carers of persons with mental health conditions or mental health issues. And so we have joining us, we have Professor Herrman. She is the president of the World Psychiatric Association and the immediate past president of the International Association of Women Mental Health and the Pacific Rim of Colleges of Psychiatrists. She's also the director of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center in Mental Health, Melbourne. Professor Herrman is a psychiatrist and a public health practitioner and a research fellow of the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council. She has a special interest in community mental health care and mental health promotion, and has published widely on these and relative topics. Professor Herrman has helped implement research programs for the mental health of marginalized groups, including the homeless, prisoners, young women, and men living out of home care. Also, we have Dr. Christina Hoven, is the director of the Global Psychiatric Epidemiology Group and a professor of epidemiology and psychiatry at Columbia University. Her studies focus on trauma, disparities, and social justice issues to enact public policy change. She has conducted research in child mental health and suicide in collaboration with WHO and the WPA, UNICEF, and Karolinski Institute. She is the commissioner of the Lancet Commission of Depression and honorary member of the WPA. So, ladies, welcome to the panel, and we'll have Professor Herrman go first.
Well, thank you very much for the welcome and introduction. And I'd like to pay tribute to two presenters, to Brandon and to Cindy, if I may use the familiar terms. But each of you has opened our eyes and our minds to the experience that you've had. And this is a form of expertise and experience that is vital to our field. As we all know, mental health, whether you're in Guyana or the United States or Australia, as I am, is a topic that doesn't receive the attention it requires. That people are, as each of you have mentioned, people don't like to even talk about the fact that they or their family members have experienced the kind of deep distress that you describe, and often in many places go without any form of assistance at all. And the one way to change this, as well as to change the experience for people going through these life events, is to combine forces to, as the practitioners and as government agencies, to work together with and listen to and be guided by people with lived experience and their family carers. And in the work that we've done with the World Psychiatric Association, we've endeavoured to encourage our member societies to link up with the people in their communities, the people with this experience, and to together to advocate to governments and to work with local communities. I take this as a form of short introduction, but would like to pass back to the panel, because I think it's important that we hear from each other as this time progresses.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Allen. And now we will hear from Dr. Hoven.
Can we identify who this person is?
He's not on the panel.
Who is it? It's not,
so there's one person who's having trouble logging in.
who is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you send in the code?
So it seems that Neaz is having some difficulty logging in. What is it?
So I emailed it to Megan, and I was hoping she would pass it on. Sorry. No, I emailed it to her. She just gave me her email, so I assumed that was how she wanted to contact it. But
Well, as you see, we're doing this conference by the seat of our pants, and we have many hiccups, and it seems that whenever Helen's on, we have the biggest hiccup. So I have to blame the Australians.
Yeah, this is.
It could never be our fault. Anyway, thank you very much. It was heartwarming to hear you, Brandon, speak about your family and how it made all the difference. And Cindy, it was just great to hear how, a sequence of events brought you to the point where you went through your own very difficult period, coming to the realization that the only way we could tackle this problem is to tackle it. And I commend you for what what you're doing with your life to do that. Just as I commend Brandon for devoting his time and energy to making a difference. And that's really the challenge that we all have, is how do you make a difference in the lives of the people, in this case the people who are doing the yeoman's work. I mean, when you think of the prevalence of mental illness, and when we talk about prevalences, we're usually talking about what's diagnosed, but there are so many millions of more people living with terrible states of anxiety. They may not reach diagnostic criteria, as we say, but that doesn't mean that their life is very much disturbed by their own troubles. And it's the family members and the loved ones that really make all the difference in the world, whether you're going to make it through that tough period, which may be a lifetime, or whether you're not. And so the question is, when we think of who is it that's providing the greatest amount of care and services for the population in need, it's the carers. It's not the professionals, be they social workers or psychiatrists or psychologists. There just aren't enough of them. They're not equally distributed. But what everyone has is a family, and many people are separated from their family. But if we start first with just family members, then we're already taking on a very big part of the population that we could think about what we might do to support that that group. And it has to do always with the degree of education. So as some people on this call have seen, in many parts of the world, you still find people with schizophrenia in cages with chains. You find people in institutions, they are there for life. There is no hope and no redeeming opportunities for those people. So the question is, how can we go between your great successes, both Brandon and Cindy and the relative, how can we go between that and the people who are still in chains to make a difference? And I would say it's the greatest opportunity we have as any society is to think about how we can better the life of the carers. And improving their life always means education. Education about what would work better, what would give relief to their relative, what would give relief to themselves. So again, as Helen would say, this is a brief introduction to that concept, but I think both of you have laid out very clearly that if the family members can be informed and are willing, and I generally find people are willing once they understand something. People are frightened and withdraw and do not take on action when they don't know what they're supposed to do. And that's a societal problem. How do we better inform people and equip them so that they're not intimidated by the role that we're talking about them assuming? Thank you very much. I'll keep, I'll be available to continue the conversation.
Yeah, Christina, that's extremely well said. I think family members have to be the first line of care for anyone experiencing a serious mental illness or even a milder form of mental health condition, because as you say, they're with the family member most of the time, vis-a-vis versus the professionals who are only with them maybe once a week if they're lucky to be with them that often. And as you said, the education has to be there. I work with other families who have loved ones with mental illness or who have lost loved ones to mental illness. And a common story, even in the United States, anywhere in the world, I'm sure it's similar, is that it's hard to know what to do. It's hard to know where to go, where to find help, what care you can provide for your loved one. And that education has to be there. And that's why there are resources appearing in the US and that I know of, such as coordinated specialty care, which is the care model that I advocate for. It's spreading across the world, actually. It was invented in Australia, thanks to folks, Helen and folks who work with Helen, like Pat McGorry down in Melbourne. And it involves the family in what's called family-focused therapy in multifamily groups, in which the family learns about what their young person who's got this mental illness is going through and why and what it means. And it's not laziness, it's not a character flaw, it's a biological condition that occurs in part due to environmental challenges they've experienced. And once they understand the nature of what their loved one's going through, they're better equipped to approach it for what it is. And then they also learn to speak constructively with their loved one. I think there are some families who assign maybe the wrong, maybe blame or to a loved one who's got a mental health condition. But if they understand that it's not their fault, that it's some biological condition, that they know they want to help them get through it. So once they understand the nature of it, they can speak with them in a way that is really helpful, listening, partnering with them, understanding what their values are, what their goals are, and then helping them achieve those goals in their life through the care they can get, both through the family and through the professionals. That's what my parents did with me. They listened to me. They knew that what I really wanted when I was so sick was to go back to college, to go back to school, continue my learning career and ultimately go into the career that I wanted to work in, which at the time was engineering. And they used that knowledge to help persuade me to engage in care. And that was a huge benefit for me ultimately, that they partnered with me in that way. And they learned to do that through their own experience with me, but also through the education they got talking with professionals they're able to talk with.
All right, so thank you for that. Thank you to our panelists and for sharing your experience. Not every day we find persons who are willing to talk about mental illnesses and talk about how those dark moments are real for them and their families. And thank you for the persons who would have shared their experience with caring for someone. Not every day we have those experiences, and we persons are brave enough to say, I have a family member, because in Guyana and in some parts of the world, it is still very much taboo to let people know that my family is suffering with a mental illness. And so at this time, I think our next panelist is still having difficulties joining, but we're hoping this is part 1 of 2 sessions, and the next session will start immediately after this one ends. So we will hope he will get to join. Ellen, I'm seeing your hands raised. Do you want to say something? You need to unmute your mic.
Yes, thank you. I was just, I see that Cindy has her hand raised, so I'll be very brief because we want to hear Cindy. But just the talk of education made me think that, you know, it has to be two-way education. We also need to encourage and educate practitioners to as to what is meaningful to families. You know, working with families is not a specialty job. It's the job of every person who comes in contact with the family member in their professional life or even in their volunteer life. And we can perhaps talk more about this in the next session. The other thing to touch on is that education is a very strong tradition in different parts of the world of family carers educating each other. So I know Brandon's had a lot of experience with peer support in various aspects and among people with lived experience, but that same concept applying to families who can be a wonderful support to each other and have, in some instances, worked out training programs that they offer to people who approach them anew as well. Thank you.
All right.
All
So,
right. Before Ms. Glen go, we want to welcome Mr. Nia Saban. And so you will speak just immediately after Ms. Glen would have shared her point. And I see Brandon raising his hand. So we'll have Brandon go after. So Ms. Glen, can you go ahead, and then we'll have Mr. Nia Saban.
Thank you very much, Alicia. What I wanted to say is just to tap in on what Brandon and Helen would have said. With education, we will really remove all of the barriers when it comes to accessing mental services, right? And we need to start in the family, because as I would have mentioned when I would have spoken earlier, is that family members are sometimes scared or afraid or ashamed of their relatives that are living with a mental issue. And once we educate the families, they will come to that position to understand that it is okay to be living with a mental issue. And with us normalizing it, that it's okay to have a mental issue, just like how you would have cancer or any other health-related issue, we will see that persons will be more comfortable talking about mental health issues that they're facing. We will see that persons are more comfortable accessing services. And more so, we will see that the families will be those support persons to encourage their relatives or loved ones to get that support and that help that is needed, right? So I just wanted to echo that education and health promotion is vital in our fight towards reducing mental stigma and increasing access to services.
All right, so thank you very much. And that we must sentiment that we all share similar views in education. Nothing can beat education. So thank you again, Ms. Glen, for sharing. And so now we will have Mr. Nia Saban share his experience with living with a mental illness.
Good morning, everyone. Let me apologize. I've been trying for the last 50 minutes or so to get into the meeting, but I had some tremendous challenges, but I'm here and my apologies for being late. I know it's almost time for the meeting to come to a close. I don't know how much time I have to speak. There's so many things that can be said, so I'll try to be brief. I am not aware what would have been said before, so I may repeat stuff that other people may have said, and I want to apologize in advance. For me, the most difficult thing was, first of all, as a person, to accept that I was actually experiencing some form of mental health related issue, mental illness, you know, given who I am, and this is not to sound vain, but being in theater for close to 40 years and films and television and whatever, at no point in time could I ever bring myself to accept in any shape or form that I was experiencing any sense of mental health. So I was in denial for quite a number of years for the period that I was really sick. And that is because maybe for the society we grew up, I came from a rural village, small village. There's certain things as boys growing up, you laugh at people. We never heard the word suicide. The only time we heard about suicide was when we had the Jonestown massacre in 1978, and we saw all the planes flying over on the East Bank with the caskets below. So that was a strange word to us. We didn't know what the word depression meant. We never felt that. We played and whatever. So whenever we saw someone in the village who may have exhibited some kind of symptoms, we teased them, wrongfully, of course, in hindsight, that they're mad. So somehow I could not have come to the realization to accept that in my own life, at that mature age, that I am actually suffering from some related mental illness. And I think that for me created its own conundrum within my own self. Because one, while denying that, I'm also trying to hide it from everyone else that I am having an issue. So I had to force that smile. I had to go to work. I had to do interviews on radio and television. I play, there's an Indian program I do every Sunday morning, playing music to entertain people. But I was never entertained even though I was playing those music. It was painful playing those music for people to enjoy. They're telling me they're enjoying it, but I am not. But I didn't want anyone to know. And I was telling a colleague only up to yesterday, the heaviest weight that I carried was the smile. I really had to be conscious that I had to smile. And all of my friends, people who know me, would always talk about what they believe to be that I have a good sense of humor. And I really had to, I think I went the extra mile to ensure that my sense of humor was on the forefront. And that in itself created a lot of emotional problems for me because I knew I was lying to my own self. But I knew if I did not keep my sense of humor, if I did not find something satirical to say about something, people will know, well, they'll ask me, Niaz, what's wrong? It's not you. And I didn't want that question to be asked. And for me, that was difficult. More so, from a family standpoint, I felt it was completely wrong, taboo, whatever word you want to use, to let my family know what I was going through. I'm the breadwinner for the home. I have children going to school, children talk. You never know what could have been the reaction or, towards them, putting my wife under unnecessary pressure, so to speak. That's how I saw it, So I said, let me take all of this. Let me be the one to soak up all of this pain, emotional trauma, whatever you want to deal with that. But you know what? It became really, really hard. And, it was a burden. It became heavy. I couldn't fetch that weight. And every single day it got heavier and heavier. And colleagues, I'm telling you, honestly, there were days when I just did not that I didn't want to come out of bed, but somehow what was happening to me mentally affected me physically. So I found out that maybe my legs didn't want to get out of the bed, but I had to. And I had to force myself, and in forcing myself, I was hurting myself. I knew I was hurting myself, but I had to weigh the options. Which pain is more easier to carry? Let me carry this so my family don't have to be ostracized. I don't have to be ostracized. What will people think of a Neaz Subhan in society? Someone who is known is basically crazy, showing symptoms of being mad. So we got to confine him to Kanji Hospital. That was what was going through my mind. And it pushed me in a very dark place, in a very, very, very dark place, a place I wish no one will ever have to go. And if they're there, I wish they can get out of that. And it pushed me to suicide, to suicidal tendencies. I tried, I failed, I cursed myself. Why is my hand not responding to what my brain wants to do? You know, metaphorically, you know, I was thinking these things. And then one day, you know, while I say, look, you know what? I can't live anymore. I just can't. It's too much. It's really, really too much. I can't. I felt I was doing myself a disservice by going through all of that. But then I asked, how would it be reported in the media? What would they say? You know, and there were national events that were happening at the time. And I was very scared that it could have been tied to some of those events, which could have further bring more taboo or, you know, stigma to my family. And by thinking how it could have been reported, I found myself over a few weeks, maybe months, being obsessed more with that than the actual tendency to commit suicide. And I felt that maybe was the safety valve in some way that allowed me to not focus on something to harm myself, but to how should I protect my family, even if I had done it and I had gone. And I think by doing that, and then maybe, as I said in my book, there will have to be a divine intervention somewhere because a friend came to me, an actor. I think I'm a good actor. I'm not saying in vain. I concealed it for so many years. I think I did a good job. But then this colleague saw right through me, you know, and he told me, hey, talk to me. And gradually with him saying that, and my thoughts changed from how it will be reported to the actual suicide. I realized that, you know what, I have to first accept that I do have an issue with mental illness, mental health issues. I have to first accept that. I have to put the pride aside. And you know what, that I'm a human like everyone else. It doesn't matter who I am in society or how society sees me. I'm human, and I have to accept that. That was not easy. I cried bitterly because I felt that I have no value. You know, I felt I've lost everything. And now I have to come to the realization that maybe I'm on the path to being crazy or already crazy. I didn't know. And that was hard. It was hard. But reluctantly, I reached out, I got help. And even while I was getting help, I wasn't very interested in it, even though I was turning back very slowly. But eventually, you know, one day, I think the therapist, having gone through many sessions, he asked me a blunt question. He said, do you want to live? And I said, no. He said, is there any reason for you wanting to live? And I said, no. And he said, okay, how many children do you have? I said, 5. He said, well, that's 5 reasons to live. I said, okay. He said, do you have a wife? I said, yes. He said, well, that's another reason. Do you have a mother? Do you have a father? Yes, that's 2 other reasons. And, you know, he went through that. And I'm thinking, what craziness is this guy telling me? I want to die, and you tell me all of these are reasons to live. But then he didn't force it to me. He said, think about it. And, you know, I start to contemplate. I go home, I see my children, their smiles, you know, they're eating. If I'm not there, would they get to eat? You know, all these things start to play in my life. And I said, you know what? I have to do this for them. Even if I don't do it for me, I have to do it for them. And I immersed myself in the therapy. I'm happy that I did. He knew who I was eventually. He learned what I did. He knew my passion in theater, writing, and so on. He said, write a journal, wrote a journal. Somebody saw it and said, hey, turn this into a book. It can help people. Could be a good tool. I did that. I don't know if it's helping people, but it's out there. And today I'm happy that I can be able to share my experience with you. It's not an easy one, but I'd rather be here than where I was. I wouldn't be so so bold to say that everything has been resolved. There are moments when things happen. I was in the COVID unit, the COVID emergency room for 50 days. And I want to believe that had I not gone through what I went through, I might have lost it while in the COVID ward, having been locked up in a small room for 50 days. So who knows, maybe my experience helped me through that. That's it. You know, I don't know if there's anything else I can add.
Okay, so thank you very much for sharing, Mr. Saban. And so we also have another colleague from Columbia University who will share with us our experience for caring for someone who would have been experiencing mental illness. Mickey, she was in the chat. So we'll ask her to share briefly.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
We're not hearing you now.
Okay, now the role of a family member is quite distinct in different for different disorders. But I am the parent of an autistic son who is nearing 40 years of age, and so I have been I have had a supporting role in my son's life for all of that time and most of my adult life, independent of my parents. It is a difficult role to be in because in the case of autism, it's very difficult for others to participate or stand in on my behalf. So when Charles goes places, he really needs either a professional or someone who's highly skilled like me. And, it's a skill that you acquire over time. So supporting a family member supporting my son also means supporting me. And that's something that people don't understand. They think that they can just say, oh, you're a saint. I mean, I get this at work even. People will say, what a wonderful person I am. And, it's difficult to hear that because for me, it's, what kind of a person would I be if I didn't love my son? If I didn't support my son? Is that what they're saying? That if to be normal, is to reject someone? Because if I'm saintly, then I'm not normal, right? So it's not saintly to love your child. And the implication of the exceptionalism of my loving my child is that he's not lovable. And that I am just imagining that this person is of value. And, a difficult life is a difficult life. That's not a question of a person's value. It's just a difficult life. Some of us are poor. Some of us have money. Some of us are pretty. Some of us are ugly. We all have, unequal distribution of positives and negatives in our life. But that does not and should not affect our basic value as human. And I feel frequently that that mental disorders and disabilities are taken to affect your value as human. And so anyway, but so I hear these things, and that's not supportive of me, and that in turn does not support my son. And the thought that somehow my supporting my son is not a lifelong activity that, you know, I don't have new things to worry about at every stage of his life. You know, early on, I worried about him hurting himself, and now I worry about other people hurting him. So more than I worry about him hurting himself. So, you know, the task is changing, ever changing, even though it appears to be the same from the outside. I have, you know, my son has a set of problems, and, you know, they don't change, but they do change. And I have to respond to that. And I have to stay the course. And I was just listening and hearing someone say, I soldiered on. But I literally have to, you know, for me, it's putting one foot in front of the other every day, and keeping the level of concern at such a state where I can function in my own life independently of my family. And I have never received support from my siblings. Neither of them ever participated in my son's life. My mother and father did, but they died, and they died, you know, more than a decade ago, and they couldn't really support me either. So, you know, my in-laws have been extremely good, and even after my husband died, my in-laws have taken an active role in my son's life. So that I have received family support, but not necessarily from my family. And it's very hurtful. I you know, setting that aside is actually extremely difficult, because it lets you know the limitations of human relationships, and that you can love someone and not fulfill their most essential needs, which is complicated. So yes, supporting the carers is supporting the person, but I think that it really needs to be construed that, you know, even with minimal support, families love their family members most of the time, even when things have gone horribly wrong, or even when things are horribly not, you know, are completely off the mark. So that's my personal experience, and I hope for every family member to be able to find that kind of support that they need to soldier on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey, for sharing. And it is important for us, oftentimes we forget the carers of the carers for persons who have been suffering with mental illness, who have been experiencing mental illness. We focus on the illness and the persons who have the illnesses, and we tend to forget or not turn a blind eye to the persons who care and support. And they also are struggling with their own feelings and their own thoughts and their own everything to help and support that person. And so it's important that we have this conversation, that how and when and the need to support carers. So at this point, I am going to open the floor to persons in the audience here and the virtual audience for questions, thoughts, comments. Yeah, once we have no questions. All right, so do we have any questions from our panel, for our panelists from the audience here in person? So we have one question or a comment, I'm not sure what it is. So.
All right, I am Danraji Himraj, representing a lot. I wear a lot of caps here this morning as a representative of the Guyana Essential Arya Samaj, of Yoga Hub, and also of Women of Faith Network. And so, listening to the last speaker just now, I'm really, really touched, and that is something that we really have to look into, because many times as carer, you know, the burden is there all the time and no kind of support is coming. And so that is one thing that, you know, we would have or be looking for support for, because they also have a life, and sometimes their life is so much down they can't go anywhere because they're all out to support, and many times we the person look after who is there, who is suffering, and they also ended up suffering from mental health. So it's like a chain, and that is one of the avenue that should be looked into. Thank you.
So thank you for that. Any other questions? Do we have any questions online? All right, so we have Martinez saying, Mickey, I applaud you for your strength as a mom. We have Jerry saying, truly appreciate your courage to share your stories. So thank you again to the panelists for sharing your stories and being the brave one to put your faces on camera and really coming out and talking about supporting the carers, sharing your live experience. And so we also have Ms. Denton saying carers need financial support as well as emotional support. And that is important, that we give emotional, we give financial, we give spiritual, give in every way that is necessary to support persons who are caring for mental illness and supporting persons living with mental illnesses. So at this point, we have no other questions. We will take a 5 minutes break and we will be back to continue the conversation. And the part 2 of this session, the panelists will remain the same. So the part 2 of the session we'll focus our discussion on how can mental health in Guyana improve through carer support. So the conversation continues. So if you might need to use the washroom, grab a coffee, grab some tea, feel free, and we'll be back